What's going on, guys? I'm Alex with Tech. How are you doing? We're going to be talking about the iPhone XR. This is a phone that a lot of you might be interested in and a lot of you guys probably have strong opinions about. And I'm going to give you my opinions about this phone after using it for a few weeks now. And the first thing I want to start out with is, yes, I'm not a huge iPhone user. Every single year I go back to an iPhone for a few months, just to understand how iOS has evolved and transformed, and I do videos about it, and then I go back to an Android phone. But regardless, I do review Apple products, and I do like Apple products, so it's not like I don't like them. So right now, we're going to talk about the iPhone XR. And the first thing that you have to talk about with an iPhone is the performance, right? We all have heard the benchmarks. We've all heard those stories that the iPhone XR beats every single Android phone in terms of performance out in the market. And we don't talk about benchmarks on this channel, but I do have to acknowledge that the phone runs amazingly smooth. It uses the Apple A12 Bionic chip with only, I'm thinking, 3 gigabytes of RAM. So I think it's confirmed that it's only 3 gigabytes of RAM. Of course, Apple doesn't really disclose this stuff. But yeah, historically, Apple has always had a very small amount of RAM compared to what the market space is. We have a phone with 10 gigabytes of RAM now in the Android space, and yet Apple, this phone only has 3 gigabytes of RAM, and it is a really smooth experience. This is a very fast phone, and to the blind eye, the naked eye test, it's as fast as the Pixel 3, if not faster. So it is up there with every single Android phone in terms of performance, and I think it's a great experience. It's a very smooth phone. The apps flow really quickly. And I do really appreciate that. And you have to give it to Apple. They do it every single year. They always seem to have like this hardware and software integration perfectly together where the specs don't have to be absolutely crazy to be competitive. In fact, most of the time their specs are much below what other people have, and they don't even release a lot of the specs. So performance-wise, you are getting top-notch experiences here. You're getting that A12 chip, which is also on the iPhone XS and the XS Max. So in terms of performance, you're not missing much. And the price point here is $750. So that's also why a lot of you guys might be actually watching this video, because the phone is only $750 compared to the other iPhones, which are starting at $1,000, and that's very expensive. $1,000 is very expensive, but $750 is not cheap in its own right, and that's where I have some of my issues with the iPhone XR. So I said the performance is great, no worries there, and it's worth the price of admission. So let's start with the display, right? Because the display is something that a lot of people have been talking about, and I feel like we have to go in depth on this one too. So the display is a 6.1-inch display. It's in between the iPhone XS and the iPhone XS Max in terms of size. And it's a 6.1-inch display with a, 1792 by 828p display. So it's slightly above 720p, but below 1080p. When you're watching YouTube videos, you're gonna have up-converted 1080p quality. And it's acceptable when you view it. It's acceptable when you watch videos, when you look at pictures. It's a decent screen. I have no complaints there. It's acceptable. However, $750 is not a cheap price point. And I have said this in other reviews before of other phones, on Android phones. And I've said, okay, display is fine. It's acceptable. It's nothing too special. It passes. And people will respond, yeah, it passes, but you're paying so much money, it should be more than acceptable. It should be terrific. It should be something special. It should be better than good, than acceptable. And yet when it comes to the iPhone XR, I've read a lot of people on Reddit saying this. I've heard a lot of arguments against this, saying the screen is fine. People are overreacting. They can't tell the difference between 720 and 1080p. Why are people freaking out that it's not a 1080p screen or better? Well, I find that hypocritical. I really do, because you have to look at this in the spectrum. You can't say, okay, we're just paying the Apple tax, because look, the screen is fine, but it's not the best. And $750, you can get much better quality screens on other phones. I feel like they can easily get one that's 1080p and just end this debate. You know, add that little boost there, because there's certain people like me, because I am a tech reviewer. I look for this. I look at the display to analyze it, to see if I can see the pixels, and I can see the pixels. You look at my home menu, I can see the pixels. You look at the wallpaper, I can see the pixels. Yes, a majority of people who don't look at it all the time maybe have a difficult time looking for looking between 720p and 1080p, but you can absolutely tell that in terms of other $750 and above phones, the display quality just isn't as good here. And I'm not even talking about my next point, which is the quality of the display in terms of durability. The durability on the iPhone, okay, so I have a few scratches, like weird scratches on this phone, right? I don't have a screen protector on here. I do have a case, but I do use the phone. I do use the phones that I review for a good 4 or 5 days without any protection. No case, no screen protectors. I used to do it early on, but you know, I realized, especially talking with a lot of you guys, a lot of my viewers, that's not a great way to test it, because I'm testing the durability of the phone, how often how easily it gets scratches during daily use and stuff like that. So you kind of lose that aspect when you cover it up and you OtterBox it or something like that. So within the first day, I got this really weird squiggly line, like crazy scribble, and a slash across the top corner of the screen. No drops. I don't put the keys. There's nothing in my pocket other than this phone. So I don't have keys in the pocket. It looks like a huge key scratch, but I never put keys on top of the phone. I'm very cautious about how I use my phones. And many of you viewers have actually purchased phones from us and given us really good reviews saying Alex has a really good description and it's better than the description. He's harder on the phone than what they actually received. And I take really good pride in that. You know, like CGC, you know, comic books. For those of you who don't know, CGC is the grading for the comic books. And I love buying old comic books and grading them and sending it in for a grade to try to get the best grade I can get. So I do that with the phones too, and I'm pretty hard on myself with how I judge the phones and how I take care of them, because, you know, as a collector. So when comparing the iPhone XR with other phones in 2018, and I'm guessing they're using Gorilla Glass 5. I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to confirm it, but Apple doesn't really like releasing these information freely. But from what I've read, I think it is Gorilla Glass 5. It's not that great of a slab here. For some reason, this scratches really easily, both on the front and the back. I love the design. I really do. I think it is a good-looking phone, very solid build. But the display scratches really easily, the back scratches really easily. And so I just, compared to some of the other phones out there, I think this is really flimsy in terms of its build for the display. Now, this is not all complaints, right? I do have things I absolutely love about the iPhone XR, and one of them is the battery life. Forget numbers. We don't need to know how big the battery is. You just have to know that the battery life is tremendous. I haven't had this great battery life since the Huawei Mate 9. This phone has given me tremendous life. At minimum, I get like 4 hours of screen on time. At most of the time, I double that, you know? And if you've watched any of my reviews, you would know that I am a very difficult judge in battery. I'm harsher than other people. Sometimes you go on Twitter, you see someone with their phone and they show a screenshot saying, oh my God, this phone has gotten me 9 hours of screen on time. And then in my review, I tell you guys that it only has like 3 or 4 hours of screen on time. So my workflow is very consistent across the board in how I judge phones. I use the same apps every single phone and the same workflow. I'm like a machine in terms of that. So my guideline to judge each phone is very equal. And for the iPhone XR to give me what I'm saying here, it's unbelievable. You know, if I tell you the battery life is good, usually other people believe it's excellent or superb or amazing. So that's what the iPhone XR here is. I'm saying it's a very damn good battery here. Now, other things like charging, right? You have wireless charging. It's nothing new here. Apple has had that for a couple generations now. It's very convenient. I throw it onto the Pixel stand or like the Samsung Qi charger, and it's awesome. And it helps me forget that this phone does not have USB-C. It still uses a proprietary Lightning port. And this is another thing I have to rip Apple on. Like, they introduced the USB-C port on the 12-inch MacBook in 2015. They tried to push it out. They said it was courage to push the industry forward, even though they weren't the first ones to do it, but they were one of the most prominent ones, and they tried to push it forward, right? Think about flash forward to 2018. Every major tech device essentially uses USB-C. Android phones, Chromebooks, Windows devices, heck, even iPads, iOS is using it. Mac OS is using it. The only major product that doesn't use it is the iPhone. The iPhone still use that damn Lightning port. It's just ridiculous that Apple is doing this, because the iPad Pro now has a USB-C port. What is the excuse that the iPhone XR doesn't have it, except to sell more Lightning cables? It's gotten to a point where the synergy just between Apple products is so broken that it just doesn't make sense. When you can't even plug this in directly for the USB-C to USB-C in your MacBook, and you have, I mean, come on, you gotta get a Lightning to USB-C or a Lightning to USB-A to use a converter to USB-C. Come on. Next generation, they really have to throw USB-C on here, and that is not even a discussion. People argue that, oh yeah, USB-C is just not ready, this and that. You can't say that. The iPads are ready. The MacBooks are ready. Android phones have been on there. Yes, there are still issues with USB-C, but when Apple themselves have thrown it on other products, you can't say that it's not ready for the iPhone. And then another thing that I said in my initial video that I didn't like was the Face ID. I thought that it wasn't very flexible, especially in low light. I am backing off that a little bit now after spending a few weeks with it. I do think that the Face ID is serviceable. It surprised me a lot, and it kind of grew on me. Yes, it still is not the most reliable in terms of situations. Sometimes in a dark situation, it still has a hard time, but I'm actually surprised. It recognized my face more than I thought it would in low light. But different angles still kind of has an Achilles heel for it. I do wish they would have kept a secondary login, like a fingerprint scanner, but I am backtracking that a little bit after spending so much time with this device. I do think the Face ID is solid and pretty reliable as it is. And then we also have to talk about the iPhone's camera, right? You always have to talk about a camera on the iPhone. And the iPhone XR's camera has a 12 megapixel camera, a same single sensor as the XS. The XS has dual sensors, and it does a lot of what the XS can do with this particular camera. It shoots 4K 60 frames, which the video quality is good, and slow-mo is awesome. It shoots up to 240. 240 though, you start getting some grain on, if it's not optimal lighting, you're gonna start getting some grain. So you drop it to 120 and it's still really good stuff. So Apple has always had very solid camera work. This is more of the same. We have a lot of videos coming up. Lita's already writing a lot of them. We're gonna show you guys a lot of comparisons and photos. So be sure to subscribe for that. But what you do need to know right now is the iPhone XR camera is solid. Colors are fine, reproduction is good. It's a solid camera. It's just, in terms of the market share, it's not the best one out there, and I can confidently tell you that. And then the rest of the things are more like user experience things, right? Like, I'm going to talk about really quickly the size. So this phone is not a small phone. It's bigger than the iPhone XS, slightly smaller than the iPhone XS Max, and it's a little heavier than the iPhone XS, a little thicker than the iPhone XS as well, but not as thick and big as the iPhone XS Max. So it's a weird little in-betweener there. It's a very solid, big slab of phone, but it's not the biggest iPhone, which, once again, it's kind of strange. Like, in the past, we just had the two models. Now we have a bunch of weird ones, right? We have the iPhone X, we got the iPhone XS, we got the iPhone XS Max, and we also got the iPhone XR. So they all are different sizes that kind of grow up there now. So it's convoluting the iPhone line, and I suspect that this phone will probably be one of the better sellers in the coming year because of the price, right? $750 entry price. It has a similar front design as the iPhone 10 with the notch. And believe it or not, the notch is a symbol, right? A lot of people complain about the notch. I personally don't really care about notches. I've been consistent across the line with all the phones. I haven't knocked a phone down because of the notch. I've always thought notch phones are what they are. It's just a design that people like, just like candy bars. And so I feel like the notch is a status symbol for a lot of people looking for an iPhone, and they see an iPhone 8 with the bezels, and you see an iPhone 10 without the bezels, with the notch, and they're like, okay, that's a status symbol. That means it's a newer phone. So the iPhone XR is a step above that in a compromise of sorts. And I feel like this phone in general is a little more of a compromise than a luxury item. And for the first time, that's something that's weird to say because iPhones are luxury items. They've always been luxury items. They've always been worth the price. They're like the brand name that you have to go and purchase, even though you know it's not necessarily the best or newest thing, right? It's just the it thing you have to get. And I feel like the iPhone XR for the first time is not like that. It's very strange. $750, once again, is not cheap. And there's certain things about this phone that still bug me, and most of that is iOS, like haptic feedback, right? So they removed 3D touch. No 3D touch on this, but we do have haptic feedback. But the haptic feedback on iOS is nowhere near what Android has. It's very strange why you would have haptic feedback for certain things and not everything. Like the typing experience on iOS, you still do not have haptic feedback. It's not just for the iPhone XR, just iOS in general. When you're typing, you don't get any feedback. You just can't. They don't even let you enable or disable it. Whereas something like the Pixel 3, which I've been using as well, it's terrific. The haptic feedback on the typing experience is great. You can argue that it kills your battery life and that's a waste, but I would at least like the option to turn that on, right? That's what haptic feedback is. There's certain things on this phone where the haptic feedback doesn't work. Yes, I understand. Before you tell me, yes, I know there's updates coming out. The next iOS update will let you do that with the notifications. You're gonna have haptic feedback on the notifications, like a fake 3D touch. But that shouldn't even be something that we need to find right now. That shouldn't even be, it should be included. It's a $750 phone. I keep saying it's a $750 phone. Like it's an excuse that it's okay for it not to have that. Yeah, stuff like that, you know, little things like this. This should be a premium phone. This should feel like a luxury item, but it doesn't. It feels like a compromise. And that's a strange thing about the iPhone XR. And that's what this is all about. Once again, I'm Alex with Set Tech. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Let me know what you guys think of the iPhone XR. I'm sure this is a very divisive device. A lot of people will have differing thoughts and opinions of it. Let me know in the comments below what you think of it, and I'll see you guys in more videos very soon. Peace.
If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, hit the bell button below so that you don't miss a single video in the future. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!